In 2006, I took part in the Three Peak Challenge. You may know that the Three Peak Challenge is climbing the highest mountains in Scotland, England, and Wales within 24 hours, including the car journeys between the mountains. So we managed it, which was wonderful, with 5 minutes to spare. And we would have managed it with more time to spare if two things hadn't happened. Number one, if we hadn't had to have an hour-long detour in Snowdonia because of a road traffic accident. And the second problem we faced was making a serious navigation error on our descent off Scafell Pike. It was about, I don't know, maybe 6 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, something like that. And we were coming down off the ridge of Scafell Pike. And I looked up at the rising sun in the sky, and I said to myself, the sun's not in the right position in the sky. And then I realized we're coming down the wrong side of the mountain. And so we had to do a U-turn on the basis of looking at the rising sun and go back up the mountain and go down the right way. Now, the reason I tell that story is because there's this amazing story connected to the resurrection of Jesus, where two disciples meet the risen Son, S-O-N, and they do a U-turn on the basis of that interaction with the risen Son. The story you'll find in Luke chapter 24, and it's a story of two disciples that are walking away from Jerusalem. Now that's really important because the whole sweep of Luke's narrative is towards Jerusalem. But these two disciples are walking away from Jerusalem. They're walking in the wrong direction, therefore, in the context of that gospel. More than that, commentators say that the town they're walking towards, Emmaus, was a Roman garrison town. Now, you may know that the Romans were the oppressors of the Jewish people at that time. And so essentially what's happening here is that these disciples are walking from light into darkness. They're walking from freedom into oppression. They're walking from faith into disappointment. They're walking the wrong way. Then what happens, they have an interaction with the risen Son, and they do a U-turn. Physically, they do a U-turn, they turn around and they start walking back to Jerusalem the right way, but also they do a spiritual U-turn in very interesting ways. And I find that a fascinating interaction because it shows that the risen Jesus is already bringing transformation to lives. He's turning lives around. And I think that's so important for us as an Easter message. Not only is Easter a time to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus, the fact that he's broken the power of death forever, wonderful though that is to celebrate, and important though that is to celebrate, but also I believe Easter is a really important time for the resurrection power of Jesus to be at work in our lives. He was at work in the lives of those disciples then. I believe 2,000 years later, he's still at work. His resurrection power can still make a difference in our lives. And I want to explore with you 3 ways in which we see those disciples do a U-turn and leading on to how we can do U-turns in our thinking. First one is this. They do a U-turn from believing lies and half-truths to getting a grasp on the full truth about Jesus. Jesus explains to them all about himself, who he is, the significance of his resurrection, and his call on their lives. And their eyes are opened. So they've been believing in half-truths about Jesus, and then they're led to believe in the full truth about Jesus. I experienced something of that as well in my own life. When I believed in Jesus as a redeemer and a savior, I didn't understand that he was my Lord as well, that he wanted to be the leader of my life. And my eyes were open to that reality, that Jesus wants to be not only a savior in our lives, but the leader of our lives as well. So maybe this Easter, there's an opportunity for us to do that kind of U-turn ourselves, to move away from half-truths to full truths about who Jesus is and his call in our lives. The excitement of building his kingdom with him in partnership with him. So that's the first U-turn they do, from lies to truth. The second U-turn I see them do is from pain to celebration. They are very, very seriously bereaved in losing Jesus, their friend, their mentor, their teacher, and they've lost him. He's been crucified, he's been taken from them. They think that's the end of the story. They're in a very, very serious place of sadness and bereavement. And then through this interaction with the risen Jesus, they realize he's alive. And they're able to return to Jerusalem in a place of celebration, excitement. Their lives are turned around. Jesus can do that for us as well. I remember a very difficult moment. It was actually when my dad died a couple of years ago. And I'd wanted to be able to say some words. I wanted to read a letter, in fact, that I'd written for him. And I was going to do it the next day, in fact. But tragically, my dad died the night before, and I hadn't read this letter. And I was really cut to the heart, thinking, why didn't I read the letter today rather than leaving it until tomorrow? And I felt Jesus say, it's okay. Your dad is with me. You read the letter to me, and I'll make sure the message of the letter gets to your dad, because he's with me now. I was in such a place of pain and bereavement and sadness over that. And then Jesus turned the situation around to say, it's okay. I've got it. Read the letter to me and I'll communicate it. And that was such a sense of release for me, such a sense of relief in knowing the consolation of that interaction, that revelation from Jesus. He can do that in our lives. The third U-turn they do is from doubt and disappointment to faith and expectation. That we read in the story that their faces are downcast. They're really dejected. They're despairing in terms of what's happened. And they do this amazing U-turn in terms of moving to a place of expectation, glorious expectation about the reality of meeting the risen Jesus and how Jesus could be at work in their lives, and just a new adventure that they're involved in living out. And Jesus can do that for us as well. If we're in a place of doubt and disappointment, he can turn our lives around. He knows our disappointments better than we know them ourselves. We don't have to pretend with Jesus. He already knows the disappointments we feel. Let's this Easter express them honestly, openly, transparently before Jesus, and let's have a faith and an expectation that he can turn our disappointment into expectation. Maybe there's things that we've been longing for a long time, and we've given up hope. We feel so disappointed and dejected that they haven't come through. Let's this Easter be ready to put our faith in the resurrection power of Jesus, that he can turn our disappointment into fulfillment. So there's 3 U-turns that these 2 disciples do: from lies to truth, from pain to celebration, and from disappointment to expectation. Jesus can do the same work in our lives today. So this Easter, let's have that faith and expectation that Jesus can do that for us today. Thanks for listening.